Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. I can be a little more expressive in the intro as I am recording this in the afternoon. Naomi is not in the house. Usually, I seem to record these at about 11 p.m. She's asleep. Mabel's asleep. So, putting any kind of energy into it, I worry that I'll wake them up. But now, the only one resting is Mabel, and she's such a annoyance. An annoyance we love, but she's such an annoyance that, you know what? If this wakes her up, I don't mind. How's everyone doing out there in podcast land? we can quickly dispense with this intro, because what are you going to say about this historical moment right now that is not either the darkest thing you've ever said or gallows humor? Not much. To paraphrase Samuel Beckett, I can't go on. I'll go sit on the couch and eat potato chips until I'm nauseated. That's a good way to deal with anxiety, right? Another good way to deal with anxiety, listening to today's episode, because what a wonderful guest. Today, I am talking to Thalia Zedek. If you don't know who Thalia is, I'm going to read you her bio right now. Originally from Washington, D.C., musician Thalia Zedek attended college at Boston University for one semester before dropping out to pursue a musical career instead. Each band she formed saw a little more success than the last, and her breakthrough was the group Uzi in 1984. They only stayed together for a short time, though, and she next joined the New York no-wave band Live Skull, who stayed together until 1990. From their breakup until 2001, Thalia was in the band Come, which she formed with Codine's Chris Brokaw. In their time together, they released 4 acclaimed records. You can find them all now on Matador. And since then, she's been performing as Thalia Zedek Band. They've released 9 albums, mostly on Thrill Jockey. And her latest, The Boat Outside Your Window, was just released in May of this year. And on November 14th, Dromedary Records will release the Lost EP of Via, Thalia's other Live Skull era band. And folks, it's a delight. I've wanted to talk to Thalia for a while now, and I saw the Via album was coming out, and I thought this was a opportune time to get in touch. I think I discovered Come when I heard the This Is Fort Apache compilation CD back in the day, which had a bunch of Boston bands who recorded at Fort Apache. I think I have that right. God, what a great way to discover bands back in the day. Compilation CDs. That's how I discovered Pavement. On the, was it Red Hot and Bothered? Was that the one? I bought that for the Nirvana song and then discovered Pavement through that. What do people do now? Just playlists? Anyway, Thalia was very cool. Her grandparents fled the Nazis while the Nazis were still in their nascent stages. So, of course, I grilled Thalia on what were the signs that you should maybe flee the country you live in and what that was like, and a ton of other stuff about growing up in D.C., and it's a cool conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Coming up on the show, I have been recording a ton in the last week or two. Coming up today, just talked to Claire Rousey. Super enjoyable conversation, a lot about growing up evangelical in Texas. Who else? David J. Roth, writer, co-founder of Defector. Another cool talk. Mark Hollander from Aksak Mabul and the founder of Cram Discs, brilliant record label, a ton of other people. So look forward to those, but for now, let's talk to Thalia. So wait, you said you're in Berlin, and I guess part of me, your mom's from Germany, if I remember correctly, right?
She is, yeah. My mother was born in Cologne, and so she was, born a German citizen.
Is there any feeling of homecoming? That's in quotes. in being in Germany?
Well, it's funny. Well, my grandparents, my mother's parents, they left during the World War II and moved to Israel, but actually they were one of the small number of Jewish people that actually returned to Germany after the war. So I grew up visiting my German grandparents in Germany in Wiesbaden. So I was familiar with it from when I was a child. But I don't, I don't know. I've got a lot of good friends here because I was in a band called Come in the '90s, and the other guitar player, Chris Brokaw, was in a relationship with a German woman who, for like, I don't know, 6 years or something, that we've stayed very close together. And she comes to Boston a lot, and with her new husband, and so I've had a lot of close connections over here. So it feels like home in the sense that I have people here that I've known for many, many years, but not home in like, I feel like I don't understand the German language, and I don't, yeah, not like that.
I guess the thing, like, I went from being like a very logical person to therapy and perform. Like, once I started performing, and I was just like, I have to be more in touch with my emotional side. I've started to become connected to like the vibe of something, right? And is there even like a vibe? Like, do you feel like resonating with the vibe? And I guess like, I mean, this, your family is from there, from the 40s, and
Right.
and this is now 2025. So I don't even know what the vibe is, or if there's a continuity. But is there any like feeling of like resonance?
Well, there is, in a sense. Like, I feel like I've been playing more in Poland the last few years. I still haven't played in many places, but the Poles are claiming me as one of their own, because my parents, my mother is German, my father's Lithuanian, so I'm totally from like Central Eastern Europe in terms of like genetic makeup and stuff like that. But my mother's father and mother, actually, the parts, they were born in Germany, but where they were born is now Poland. And one of the places her father was born is this very famous punk rock city, this little town called Yarocin, and it's famous for having like the really, really early punk rock festival in Poland. So every time like someone hears that, like I have a background from Yarocin, they're like, oh, that's why you're in music. And yeah, so and her mother's side is from a town called Gliwice, which is now part of Poland near the Czech border. So, and it's also a sort of famous town for music stuff. So it's interesting. I'm finding out, more about my background here, and people are telling me more, are interested that, I have family that comes from here, but, I don't have currently any family living in Europe. So, and, I didn't, so it's weird. Like, in terms of like the land, like definitely don't come here and be like, oh, this is like, I feel like I'm at home, you know what I mean? Or anything like that. But
I do. Because when I went, my parents are from New York, and I grew up in Pennsylvania. And when I finally moved to New York, it was always this kind of like beacon that like, I was like, oh, there's some pull here, and I don't understand, or I can't articulate. And when I finally moved there, everything kind of settled in me. And I think that's what I was like trying to think about, like, oh, there are places where it just feels right.
Well, New York, though, I mean, I can totally see that with New York. And actually, my partner had a similar experience, like growing up in Boston, but both her parents were from New York, and going back there and just being like, oh, these are my people, like totally, because I mean, New York's got a really special place. But yeah, I feel pretty, I would definitely don't feel super, super tied into like any one country, which is an interesting kind of place to be at in the world. It's kind of I don't feel like really connected to, I don't feel incredibly connected to the United States, even though I was born here and grew up here, but like having parents that weren't from here and didn't know the customs really. And, like, I don't have that kind of like all American thing either. So, yeah, I guess I'm, sort of classic diaspora, thing. But
yeah, for sure. There's this kind of, I feel American and I don't feel American at the same time, like a kind of Schrodinger type thing where it's all at the same time. It's not like there's moments where I'm like, yeah, now I'm an American. I'm driving a truck and I'm waving a flag and I'm an American. There's never
Yeah.
moments like that. It's always just this kind of like confused mishmash, I guess, like all the
Right.
time. And
Yeah.
sometimes you feel it and sometimes you don't.
Right. And I mean, to me, like what makes America great is the fact that it's a made up of immigrants, which kind of makes the situation we're living in right now in the current administration all the more ironic because everything good in America has come from immigrants,
Yeah.
and like nobody in the government or any of these people who are talking this shit actually is from North America. The only people that are actually from North America are like the indigenous tribes, like, the Navajo and the, Cherokee and, so people seem to maybe forget that. I don't know. They think
Yeah.
that they're American, but actually they're mostly European, European, South America, whatever. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah. Well, wait, when you grew up in DC, right?
I did. Yeah. Yep.
Did you feel like you had a community there? Because even when growing up in Pennsylvania, I was like one of a handful of Jews in my high school. So I always felt, even though like I was accepted, no one like really like, there are a couple anti-Semitic incidents, but like nothing like major. I always felt still on the outside. Like, did you have a community where you felt like part of something when you were growing up?
I did, and I think DC still kind of feels like home to me more than, even though I've been living in Boston for most of my life at this point, like only like 2/3 of my life has been in Boston. But, Boston's very kind of a strange town. Like if you don't go back 3 generations, you're not really from there. But I do love Boston. But I have to say, when I go back to DC, it feels like the air, the way it looks. And I really enjoyed growing up in DC. My father taught at the University of Maryland in College Park, which is right outside DC. And I spent sort of half and half, like the first half of my life, like until I was maybe 11 years old, grew up in the city, and then like junior high school and high school in Silver Spring, Maryland, which is just outside the city. And I was like punk rock I remember seeing the Cramps at University of Maryland, Patti Smith, and I don't know, I did like it. But it was kind of like, have to describe, like when people, the way I describe my high school experiences, I don't know if this movie is kind of old at this point, but there was a movie called River's Edge, which Keanu Reeves was in. I don't know if you've ever seen it. And that was kind of like my high school. That was kind of like Silver Spring in the 70s. I guess now it's all kind of like DC, and it's been more folded into DC. So, but yeah, I did feel pretty comfortable there. And it was I think my experience with the people, there was a lot of different types of people there. And, I didn't feel like, that I didn't fit in at all.
Yeah. I mean, it was a tumultuous time, especially in DC, I would think. Did any of that stuff leak in, or was it always happening somewhere else in the city or somewhere else, period?
Oh, no, totally. I mean, it totally leaked in, like, especially because, I was born in 61. And so I lived in DC until 72, 73. So all the like Vietnam War protests and all that stuff, like I grew up with. I mean, it wasn't happening like right on my street, but my mother worked downtown and at a clinic downtown, and yeah. So I was aware of it, what was going on. I guess I thought it was normal. Like I kind of grew up in a pretty tumultuous time, and then things mellowed out for quite a long time until just recently,
Yeah. Do you think, like, when you say it was like normal, do you think that acclimates you to kind of like chaotic political times where, so that
No.
like, no,
No, no, definitely not. I mean, I don't feel that way anyway. Maybe some people do. I was pretty young when that stuff was going on. I didn't really understand, but I do remember, like, I remember watching, TV with my parents after dinner when I was like, probably like 6 or 7, and they would scroll down the list of the people who had been killed in Vietnam that night, like every night. At the end of the news, they would list like the casualties, and like I remember that, and it made an impression on me for sure. And but but I think I was too young to really be scarred by it, and maybe because no one in my immediate family. I'm sure if like my father had been in the army, or I had a brother in the army or whatever, but because you know, it was just me and my brother, and my two parents are the only people living in the States, so we weren't really that affected by it. But I definitely was aware of it and of the protests, and I grew up around a lot of protests, and stuff like that. So
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of like, because I grew up in the 80s and all the political stuff was kind of like on the outskirts of life, right? The
yeah,
narrative that was handed to me was everything's great now. And then by the time
right.
the Soviet Union collapsed, it's like now fine, now everything's going to be great forever. That was the whole narrative of the
Mhm.
first 2 decades of my life. And
Yep.
so why I asked that was like, I got used to this. I got acclimatized to it, kind of like, well, everything's going to be good. And then I guess really Bush being given the election by the Supreme Court was like, and it didn't occur at the time. It's only in retrospect, was like the first kind of volley in the full kind of right wing takeover of the United States. And so the second half of my life so far has been, I'm just been like, what is going on? And every day feels absurd.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, like being in Europe now and traveling to different countries, especially countries that were once ruled by authoritarian regimes, like Czech Republic and Poland and places like that. And they're all like telling me, like, okay, this is what's happened. Like I'm talking about it with them, and they're like, yeah, we know, we've been through it. This is how it
Wait,
happens.
do you have any good tips? Do they give you any like, hey, here's how you're going to weather this next thing that's coming?
No, they're like, oh yeah, everything that he's doing is like, this is like textbook, like the whole thing with the Supreme Courts, and like the court cases that get filed but never come through, and by the time they come through, it's too late because the person's already been deported and all that stuff. They're like, yeah, this is like, this is what they've seen it all, so they're seeing it. They're looking at it in a different perspective. Like we're like, I don't know, maybe this is happening. They're like, this is totally happening, and people are very, very worried for us and for themselves too, because
Mm-hmm.
you know, and they're dealing with their own like right wing stuff, and but this playbook they have definitely seen before.
Mm,
And,
mm.
you know what I
But you're
mean?
telling me though that like even in the kind of like crazy political atmosphere of the 60s, it didn't like
No.
form you in a certain way. So it's still
Yeah.
like absurd and awful.
Well, yeah, definitely, yeah, because the '60s, I was like pretty small. Like I am very old, but I'm not
You're not that
that
old.
old. I'm not very old, but I'm like, medium old. But I was like a kid in the '60s, and I'm probably more aware of a bunch of stuff that was going on than some people, because I grew up in D.C. area, so that's where all the big protests were and the riots, and that. But but it's a completely different thing. I mean, this is an authoritarian takeover.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
who I could never imagine that, and maybe it won't. Maybe it'll not happen. There's still hope.
It's
Yeah, there
optimistic.
is. So yeah, I mean, uh, it's not a done deal, and we can't. We'll see, but it's completely shocking to me.
Yeah.
And everyone, I can't believe it. And then, like, why?
Yeah.
Why would I don't
Sorry, I didn't
know.
mean to. It's just that I was thinking about, I'm like, the most violent act that somehow penetrated my consciousness, and it's only because it was right in front of my face, was the Challenger explosion when I was a kid. And they showed it
Oh
at
yeah,
school. So we all watched a bunch of people explode. And I was thinking, oh, well, you're a kid and people are being like, political figures are being assassinated like that.
yeah,
And I'm like, that seems the violence, that kind of, and plus you said you're watching the news and they're showing you a list of people who died in the war, like that week or whatever it was, that day or something. And I'm like, oh, that kind of, I'm curious, like, if that if it just, if it penetrates your head, or if you're just like, if like the kid bubble is, you're just like, oh, okay, I guess that's happening. And I don't know what it means, but it's happening.
I mean, I think it definitely it had to have an effect, and also, you know, the assassination of Bobby Kennedy. I remember that, and that happening, and Martin Luther King, and yeah, it was a very tumultuous time. So I'm sure it had some effect, but I don't know what it was. I wouldn't say. I think I was more influenced by like the punk thing and stuff that was happening in the 70s, because that's kind of when I was more like, thinking for myself, and
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. Did you have, and whatever you're comfortable telling me, did you have a stable home life?
I did. Yeah, I did. My parents, yeah, they stayed together until the end. My mother's still alive. My father passed away about 15 years ago. But yes, so it was a small family, but stable. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Because I think this is the thing that I'm starting to realize. I'm like, if things are okay at home, fascism, like, you can kind of like, you have the energy to kind of deal with fascism or deal with like political tumult or something like that. And it's
yeah,
like when things are unstable in both places, then everything kind of feels nuts.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess so.
So wait, you said your family, they left during the war. Are both your parents Jewish?
They are both Jewish, but my mother's family left during the war, and my father's family they left, but not because of the war. They emigrated, but they both ended up in Israel, which was Palestine at that time, and then came to the States in the late 50s
Mm-hmm.
or mid 50s. So, and then me and my brother were both born in the States.
How early did they get out? Like, are they talking like they saw the writing on the wall, and so like
Yeah.
39, something like that?
No, my mother's family got out in 33.
Oh, early.
Yeah, so Hitler was already in power, and there was already some shit going on, but it was like, well, it was still encouraged for Jewish people to leave. Like, sure, you want to go. um, so they got out early, and just the immediate family, and the rest of them. Actually, a couple. I have some relatives from Venezuela too, who ended up in Caracas, and so yeah, some people made it out to various places. I think some distant relatives in New Zealand and Caracas, and an uncle in Los Angeles who I actually never met. My father's family was from Lithuania, like, for a long time, and they moved around the same time, maybe like a year earlier. I think it was around the same time in Lithuania for political reasons, but not because of, like, the Germans hadn't yet taken over Lithuania. So
Do you know what your grandparents did before they left?
yeah, my grandfather on my mother's side was a dermatologist.
Oh, wow.
He was a doctor, a medic. That was the only type of medicine you were allowed to practice if you were Jewish. So you mainly treated venereal disease and other dermatological things, but he was a doctor, and he stayed in that profession. And my father's father was kind of like, he did a lot of different things. I remember him being a toy maker. He was kind of an inventor guy. He invented this like circular slide rule and all these like games. I remember like being like visiting him, and like he had like sort of this workshop bench set up on the porch, and he like all these like, yeah, and I think he had a lot of sort of unsuccessful business practices
Oh,
over his life, but was a very sort of inventive kind of guy,
did anything hit, or was it always like, I got
Yeah,
this thing, and
no,
then it never?
I don't think he was very financially successful. Yeah, yeah.
Do you know what the appeal, like? Well, I mean, I guess I get it. Like, you try 10 different things and hopefully one of them hits, but like,
I don't know how he got into the toy stuff. Exactly. I know when he was in Lithuania, his family had like a shop, or someone in his family had a shop, and he would like buy lace. Like, he was kind of like a traveling salesman. He would travel a lot, and traveled to a lot of different countries and brought stuff back, like, merchant back. So like, I guess he was an import export guy or something like that. And then when he moved to Israel, he had an orchard. And then I don't know, he ended up being like I think he, I think he had a failed like banking thing at some point. But yeah, I just remember my father told me that he was just not a very successful businessman. But I remember him when he was doing. He was quite old already, but he was like making toys, and I remember the circular slide rule, which I think thought was really cool.
Yeah.
And my father became a mathematician, so I don't know. Maybe there was some kind of numbers thing. You know what I mean? In there, like math is kind of an interesting field because it takes a certain type of brain. You know what I mean, to do it. So I guess sort of like abstract, thinking type brain or something. I don't know.
Yes, I do understand because I am slightly competent. Like I can do
Okay.
enough of it. Because to me, it seems like math, especially like high level writing proofs and that kind of thing, is a game. Is like figuring out what are the rules, and then all right, well then I'm gonna write a proof for like Gödel's incompleteness theorem. All right, here's the rules. The rules dictate certain things, and now here's this like problem that the rules create. So I'm going to try to figure out what the deal is with that problem. That's such a very basic way. You could tell where my mathematical competence by how I just described it.
I am not math. I did not inherit that gene, so I have no idea what you're talking about. But like I know, I do. I know that my father, would always like, he found math very beautiful. Like to him, it was like an equation was like a piece of art, you know what I mean? Or something like that. So I know that there's a whole other side to it but I was never good at it for whatever reason, despite him telling me, you're good at math. You're so much smarter than my students. But I was terrible. And I wasn't terrible. Like I wasn't like some friends of mine who like had to have professors stamp their thing because they just could not. They were really smart, but couldn't pass a single math class. But I wasn't that bad. But I stopped taking it as soon as it was like became an elective, which I think was in my case like after algebra 2, I stopped taking it.
Well, let me look. I could trace and this is complete conjecture, but I can trace a line down from your dad's dad who would create things out of whole cloth, right? There's something he sees something that he thinks is needed, right? There's some problem, like a circular slide rule. I don't know what it solves, but he thinks there's some problem that solves. Maybe he's wrong about what the problem is or what needs to be solved in that. Then from your dad who sees abstract problems created by mathematical rules that need to be solved. And then where there is a certain kind of music is, in a way, like you feel the math in your body. At least the way that I, like, if I'm playing music, right, you feel it in you in a certain way, right? You feel the rhythm or you feel the thing. This is a stretch. I understand it's a stretch, but you can kind of draw some kind of like weird line throughout the generations.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's a connection between math and music. And actually, I didn't really talk much about the maternal sides of these families, but because neither my grandparents, worked outside the home, but my grandmother, both of my grandmothers were singers. So and though neither of my parents played an instrument really, they were huge music and are, like, my mother's still alive. She huge music fans. So it was very, very important to them. They're very appreciative of music. So
do you think that got into you as a kid at all?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think music's a really good way to connect with children. Children really love music. So, they love songs, they love singing, they love, and so I think, my parents used that a lot with me. We like sort of, put on records, and we had like, kids records and stuff like that. And other stuff. And yeah, I was always encouraged to listen to music, and
Was it something though that you took to, or was it just one of the many things that you were doing when you were a kid?
I'd say that I took to it pretty young, though I wasn't really good at it. But but I we had a piano because it was something that my parents were musical and they liked music, even though they couldn't play, and they both grew up in situations where it wasn't really optional for them. They couldn't have, so it was something they wanted. Oh, we'll have a piano in the house, and the kids will take lessons and stuff. And I didn't last that long, but I think but I did take. I had a hard time with like the lessons stuff, but I always kind of wanted to learn. And then I think when I was about 9, I was in a school in England, actually in London. We were over there for a year, and it was kind of a weird school. Like, it was a regular school, but it was like just weird because my teacher was the head of all the music programs. So we were constantly in music class, and I mean, I had some regular lessons too, but like it was like because she was, the head of the choir, and she was the head of the recorder thing, and she was so, I started really liking music, and like everyone had to learn to play like recorder, and I learned to read music, and an older student came to visit the class and had a clarinet and played clarinet, and I kind of fell in love with clarinet. And when I moved back to the States, I asked my parents if I could learn, and I went to a couple like big public schools in Silver Spring, Maryland, like Francis Scott Key Junior High and Springbrook High School, and they were both had bands. They were very large schools, and so I was pretty much in band from the time I was like in 7th grade.
Once you started doing that, do you think that was the focus, or was it just like, because I have like plenty of friends from high school who are in band who are now engineers or whatever, right?
Right. I mean, I think for me, like, I think it was just something I really enjoyed doing, and that was really fun. I knew that I wasn't like a virtuoso. I wasn't gonna be like in an orchestra or anything like that, but it was really fun. It got me out of gym class, and I was like, I don't know, I just liked it. It got me out of the house. And I think like it was more like singers and songwriters and stuff when I got a little bit older that I started like really feeling something really specific about. And I think definitely kind of like in 76, 77, when Patti Smith first came out with Horses, that was like a really big deal, and kind of like, holy shit, and the whole punk thing, the Ramones, and just punk rock, like kind of ethos of anyone can play, and you don't have to be like this like virtuoso to have a band and do something cool. And that was really freeing. So that's definitely the milieu I came from, like in DC, sort of like punk clubs. I grew up going to the Atlantis, like hitchhiking into town when I was 16 and going to the punk clubs and stuff like that.
Hitchhiking?
Yeah, because there wasn't a metro then, and that's what people did back then. You would just kind of hitch a ride,
and that wasn't scary.
It was already kind of scary, but I would usually always do it with a friend, but it was more common back then. That was just the 70s, so that was different.
Oh yeah, no, I've seen films and I've seen TV shows where people are hitchhiking, and I'm just like,
it's just common then. Yeah, you'd just be like, probably stupid, but I guess things weren't quite as scary then. But I was lucky, but I had a couple close calls, and I stopped that, in the 80s. I stopped that like this period. But yeah, but at the time, sometimes someone would get their parents' car, or whatever, and we'd go into town. But yeah, I used to see the Cramps a lot, because DC is pretty close to New York, it's only like 3.5 hours, that we would get a lot of the New York bands, because, that would be an easy out of town gig for them to get. So I saw the Ramones a lot, saw the Cramps a lot, saw Patti Smith a bunch.
Well, what is the kind of pathway? Because, okay, here you are, you're in band, you're playing clarinet. Are you forced to kind of do like whatever, like, classical music, Peter and the Wolf, whatever is like you're supposed to play in band in high school, and then you suddenly see this music, and you said that it's this freeing thing, but in terms of like your own playing, are you suddenly like, oh, I can do that, or what is like what's happening internally, I guess.
Well, I guess for me, like, so I just like playing music, and I like really like the sound. I like really like the clarinet, and so I wasn't ever really into classical music, but that's what I just played what I had to, what I was told to play. But I got I guess I got into Bob Dylan, and I got into I had a friend that played guitar, and she lent me a guitar and kind of taught me some chords, and I started writing. And I guess kind of actually probably really relevant to all of this is that I wrote a lot of poetry from the time I was a really, really small kid. And so I think like that's part of what really hit me about Patti Smith is because actually I think I got her poetry books around the same time as her record came out. And I was really into poetry when I was really young, and so just sort of the combination of the poetry and the music, and like Dylan's lyrics were also like really poetic, and so I was always very, very into lyrics were always really important to me. And I always like people with kind of unconventional voices. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you think you were raised in an emotionally open household? And I ask that because poetry to me, like I said earlier, I was pretty logical as a kid and only kind of like into my 30s started to like open up emotionally. Poetry was such an expression of emotions, or from, it doesn't have to be, but I'm saying like in my estimation as a kid, it was something that came from something deep that I couldn't access it. And I'm wondering like what was it about your childhood that allowed you to access that kind of, again, I'm assuming that there was some kind of like deeper emotion into it. You could also just have wordplay, but I'm curious.
I don't know. Like I really don't know. I remember like as a really, really young child, like 6 years old, like writing this like 4-page poem. Like I was just I don't know why, like being really into of all poets. Like I remember as a really little kid being really into I was really into Nikki Giovanni. I was really into reading, and I don't know if I know why I like poetry so much. I don't know why. I liked making up stories. I remember I used to like make up I realized that I was able to make up like really scary stories. I was like, the kid that, could tell the story and everyone would be like hanging on to every word. So I don't know what it was about poetry. Like neither of my parents are, they both my mother liked to read a lot of stuff, but not poetry. I don't remember either my parents reading poetry really or anything.
Yeah. But it wasn't embarrassing. I think that's the thing I'm trying to say is like, it was embarrassing, and still I have trouble writing things that are genuine, even if they are, even if they are kind of, I mean, poetry will have like you're doing something linguistically more interesting with it than, but it's embarrassing for me and less so now. And I'm curious, like, was it ever that, or you were just okay, like, this is what's in me and I'm okay putting it out there?
Yeah, I think I was more like that. Yeah. I
Wow.
think
Because to me, that means that you felt safe. At least that's what I think, right?
I guess. I mean, yeah. Yeah, I guess I must have. Like I was, you know, my family never made fun of me for like that, Like yeah, it was okay to express that. It was okay to be artistic. Even though neither my parents, like they weren't artists themselves, but yeah, I wouldn't say that I was wildly encouraged, especially not with music, because I think for the kind of stuff my parents liked and kind of like the culture they came from, they were just like, you're not good enough to be a musician. You're never going to be, because they were comparing me to like, someone who's like, plays in the symphony orchestra or something like that.
Right.
And, they were right. Where they came from, it was just sort of like a craft, but I was, so I really had to kind of like, I was not encouraged to really do the stuff. And I just kind of really had to really did it because I really wanted to do it, kind of against my parents, what they had told me, and much later they came around, and and were proud of like me and what I was doing, and wow, you're doing this stuff. But did they ever really? They kind of, I don't know, kind of understood it, but they were pretty discouraging because they're like, you're not good enough, you're not talented enough to do this, you're never going to be successful, and you should do something else. But I had
Huh.
a passion. I had my own ideas of what I wanted to do, and I'm pretty stubborn person. So
Well, yeah, I was going to ask, what was it about you that allowed you to wall off their concerns? It was just being stubborn.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like kind of a little bit the kind of person. If someone tells me I can't do something, I'm like, yes, I can. I don't. Pretty rebellious in nature. And so someone telling me I can't do something, I'm not good enough to do something. You know, I don't really. That doesn't really stop me. Plus, like, this was the whole punk rock thing. You know what I mean? It's like it's not about being like this great player. It's not about being this great singer. It's like about being yourself and expressing yourself, and so
Yeah.
so that was that that that's what got me into it. Like a punk rock thing hadn't been happening. I don't know.
Well, that's what makes me
Right.
curious. Like, is this something that's just like, well, this is just the way my brain was set up. I would like, as a kid, I was always, if someone said, you can't do this thing you want to do, you would be like, fuck off. I'm going to do it anyway. I mean, maybe you'd be a little more polite, but like, was that a thing that's just like, maybe this is just how I'm set up? Or did you learn from some situation where someone told you not to do something and you felt disappointed that you didn't try it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand what you're getting at. No, I think I was just kind of always like that. I think also like, maybe having parents that are immigrants, like my experience was so different from their experience that they couldn't really understand me. There was like a big generation gap. So I kind of like took what they said a little bit with a grain of salt, because I knew that they didn't really understand what I was doing. So I so I didn't take it that personally. I was kind of like, well, they don't get it. Like I mean, I understood what they were saying to me, but like they don't understand what I'm seeing. So
Yeah. Did you know that from an early age, or is that something in retrospect you've like realized?
I think, I don't think I think when I became like an adolescent, when I started getting more into music and more into like, playing and serious about it, I kind of realized that I realized that they didn't like understand what I was doing, like in terms of that kind of stuff. And so I just decided not to listen about 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 that kind of stuff. Like I knew what they were saying, but I knew they also didn't understand what I was doing
Mhm.
on a pretty deep level, in terms of the music I was making and the songs I was writing. So I was just like, it's just a generation gap, like
Yeah.
it's type thing, which is, now these days, I think with parents and kids, it's not really as pronounced as it has been in other eras, but I'd say, so I knew that they couldn't understand what I was, that they didn't. So that made me not take what their warnings or their, admonitions as seriously as maybe I would have if I felt like they did understand what I was doing.
Right. Right. Did you react now the way that you're describing it seems very kind of all right, I get it. Like you were very I don't know what the word I want is. Like there was empathy there. Or was it like when I was a kid and I couldn't articulate what my parents wanted something for me that I didn't want, but I couldn't articulate that. So I just reacted kind of just like you don't like yelling. There was a lot of yelling from me to my parents.
Yeah, yeah.
Was it closer to that, or was it closer to like, oh, all right, I get it. I'm empathetic towards your position, but I don't want that.
Well, I think, I mean, I definitely had when I was a teenager, I had a lot of me and my parents did not get along like at all. We had a lot of there was a lot of conflict, but I think in the back of my mind, I kind of understood where they were coming from because they both had like really difficult childhoods and upbringings, and I was aware of kind of like their whole where they came from, and why they were the way they were. So I think there was an element of me having empathy for them, and knowing that they really loved me too. They were, even though we had a lot of hard times, I never doubted that they really loved me. So there was that stability and that sort of like room for me to, be able, or strength there, like to do other things that there are others still going to love me. I'm not going to listen to them, but they're not going to hate me because of it.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's what I think is interesting is like, that's a really, I was going to say good. I couldn't think of another adjective. That's a good awareness to have when you are that young. Cause as you're saying that, I'm just thinking, I was like, I didn't think about, and my parents didn't have, my grandparents are the ones who immigrated here. So my parents had a kind of normal all American 1950s childhood. But like, I wasn't thinking about like what their experiences were, or it was just like, they wanted something for me. I didn't want that. And so it was like, fuck you guys. Again, I didn't say that to them, but like, that was the attitude.
Yeah. But that's normal, I think, normal attitude, maybe in a way,
Yeah.
I don't know if that was only for a period in your life, or that was something that was ongoing, or but
It was a period. It ended, but it's over.
Yeah.
But still, like, there's this kind of like, as an adult, where you're just like, I could have dealt with that better as a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, everyone can do better. Your parents probably could have done better too, like,
Sure.
and so could have mine, but everyone just does the best they can.
Did they have a specific want for you though? Like they wanted a direction. Like your dad was a dermatologist, right? So he wants you to be.
No, he was a mathematician.
Mathematician. Sorry,
Yeah.
grandfather.
Yeah.
He was a mathematician. Do he want you to go into academia? Was there a thing he wanted for you?
I think they both wanted me to go to college, which I did not do. But besides that, I don't think that they really had a field they wanted me to go into. I mean, they're like pretty supportive. They just wanted me to be happy. They wanted me to be secure financially, like they wanted to they worried, about my future, like they wanted me to, of course, every parent wants their kid to do something boring and safe and financially secure, for maybe not every parent, but I think probably the vast majority of parents want their kids to know their kids are going to be okay, you know what I mean, and be able to take care of themselves and stuff. So I think music is not the most financially stable thing to get into, and so they definitely weren't thrilled that I was like putting so many eggs in one basket. But I was just, I never really liked school. I had kind of like a weird relationship to school for some reason, and I never really wanted to go to college. And I did try it a couple times. I did like one semester at school in college when I was 18. And I did really well. I did pretty good, like I would say really well. I got like, I don't know, I can't remember exactly, A's and B's or something like that. But it just wasn't for me. I was not interested in it. I was always just very interested in music and writing songs, and I don't know why. I just like always, and I kind of knew what I wanted to do pretty early. I wasn't one of those people. I mean, and I have like a lot of friends, that are like, you're lucky because you know what you want to do. You knew what you wanted to do, and like I've never figured it out. But then I'm like, yeah, but you've done so many things, and I've only done one thing. So I was a little bit like blinders on. I was a little bit like that, So I didn't really consider other things, and so I
Yeah, but is there
whatever reason.
once that got you, what else would there have been that you wanted to do?
I don't know, like people are in bands and then they go on and become lawyers, or they're in bands and they go on and become something else and do something else, become chefs or become like whatever, I mean, and I've always had like, day jobs and stuff, and eventually I did find like work that I enjoyed doing, most of the work I'd done, day jobs, have been like in cooking and catering and restaurants, and I actually enjoy that. And I'm not like great at it, but I'm was something that I could do and that was flexible and that I enjoyed the sort of camaraderie and like, the things. And I think I just always like kind of working with my hands and being a little bit more, was never really a big into sort of theoretical stuff and I don't know,
Yeah.
academic stuff,
Yeah.
Though I always loved like literature and books and poetry and stuff like that, but I wasn't into like theory and,
Do you think that's the thing that bugged you about school, having to do that kind of stuff? Was it the structure? Like, what was it like? Because I
yeah,
also didn't really like. I did well at school, but I didn't really
yeah.
like it. But I never could articulate why I didn't like it.
I don't know why. I think for me, like a lot of it was social that I didn't like. I didn't like, I felt really, I think like out of place and just kind of
Huh.
like didn't understand like I really hated like the sort of social aspects of it. And then I also like got into drugs pretty young. Like I started smoking pot probably when I was like 13 or 14 and just kind of like got in with that crew of people. So I think that really, I'm sure had an impact on my experience of high school because I was like stoned a lot of the time, so, you know.
Yeah. Did you already have a life path before becoming a stoner, or do you think through that? Because I think it is interesting that like even if you are like stoned a lot, you still might be able to figure out what you wanted to do in life. Or was it before that?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely enjoyed high school a lot more when I was stoned. I remember like going to high school.
Sure.
It was like fun, like to go to high school high, it was like going there like not stoned was not fun. But I don't think that that had anything to do with it. I think just yeah, I don't know what that where I'm not sure exactly where that all came from, but I don't think that that affected like me being interested in music or anything, though I did go through a period when I was like in my teens where I loved getting high and smoking pot and playing guitar. It's so weird. Like now, on the rare occasions I smoke pot, like I don't have that connection with music. I'm just kind of like, oh, I'm stoned and I can't really actually play. Like, but I remember when I was young, being like, whoa, But um, yeah, I rarely do pot nowadays, but like every once in a while I will. And yeah, that was, and then I'm like, and I don't really enjoy it anymore. But yeah, I think I don't think it had anything to do with the music thing. But when you were asking, we were talking about school and stuff, and I was saying I didn't really like it, and then I wasn't really interested in it, and then I think, well, actually, probably I forgot to mention that I was also doing a lot of drugs and kind of in like a pretty druggy crowd, and I don't know if that went. I might have been more interested in school and scholarly and other types of stuff if I wasn't high. So
Oh, because in my head, you were just like, this sucks. This is boring. Oh, it's actually okay when I'm high. All right. I guess I'll just, smoke a
yeah, I don't know.
blunt
I don't
before
know.
school.
Yeah, I don't know. I never really I don't know what I can't say. It's hard. It's a hard one to unravel.
Yeah. Because I'm trying to
Kind of
figure out,
look.
because I grew up during the Dare era. So I was like scared of drugs. So school was boring and I was always trying to figure out how to make it more fun. But I was
Yeah.
scared of drugs. So I never made it more fun that way. It was always just like goofing off and making jokes and getting in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, that was probably a more healthy way to deal with it, but
Maybe.
who knows? But yeah, but a different era. And I wasn't scared of drugs. I remember like when I was kind of growing up, I remember like in the 70s, like, oh, cocaine is great. It's not addictive, because it was like heroin was the big bad drug, but like everything else was like kind of okay. But I don't know. I just kind of like grew up in a really druggy part of the country in a really druggy time, like the 70s, and there was just like a lot of bad shit going around. So the 60s was over and peace and love and all that shit was over, but the drugs were still there, and all that kind of stuff. So
Was Silver Spring middle class, upper middle class? Like, where did it fall?
it was middle class.
Middle
Yeah.
class.
Yeah.
So even the drugs, like, kind of, because in my mind, I'm like, oh, it's a thing that like kind of like wealthy kids are doing at school, but it even like filtered down.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I wasn't doing like coke really when I was in high schough, though it was around, but like, yeah, it was mostly like pot. acid. But Rockville, Maryland was the center of PCP at the time. And so that whole angel dust thing like was all happening around me, like when I was in high school. And that stuff was really bad news.
Yeah.
Really bad news. I saw a lot of people get really fucked up and damaged on that stuff. But
So at what point though in all of this are you saying what I actually want to do is make music? Like that's the thing. And I'm going to try to follow that out.
Well, so I've been writing poetry, and then I stopped writing poetry. I started like writing songs with like friends, and I had little bands with friends. And then I got kind of hooked in. The DC scene was just starting to happen with like Skip Groff's record store Yesterday and Today, and like bands like the Slicky Boys and the Deceits and Urban Verbs. And I answered an ad for a band, and I was in this band with this guy that had been in a band called the Shirkers that had a single that I really liked, and I'd seen them play at like the Atlantis. And anyway, so I got in a band with them, and we never played a show, but we ended up recording with Don Zantera, and I just kind of got more serious about, like, I practiced a lot, and I was just serious about it. I wanted to be good. I guess it started kind of like around when I was about 15 or 16, I started getting more like into it. I mean, it's kind of like a bug, it's kind of like I got bit by the bug, it's just like, I don't know. It just made me feel really good. So I just wanted to do it all the time.
I think it is interesting though. The thing that, I think a lot about stuff that like happens earlier in people's lives that there's a switch. They move into like an artistic direction, and that thing from earlier in their life now makes more sense. Where like when I was saying about like, the kind of person you have to be to write poetry and to be okay and not embarrassed writing poetry is also the kind of person you have to be a performer, to write music, not just write music, but to perform music. I think there's a connection there. I mean, maybe I'm just like...
No, I can see what you're saying. It's like a willingness to make yourself vulnerable in a way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I'm like a mediocre performer because I'm too embarrassed of like fucking up or doing something embarrassing accidentally because you're in the moment. And then like, I know your dad was a mathematician, and I'm still kicking myself that I said dermatologist. It was a mistake. And you knew it was a mistake. You knew I knew, like, from talking.
Yeah.
But I'm still kicking myself from that.
Really?
From 15 minutes ago.
Okay.
So like,
so you're a perfectionist. You're hard on yourself.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
Oh yeah. When I'm writing a script, I'm writing like it. Like most people, and I see around me, they're like, "Yeah, here's a first draft. This is fine." And I'm like going over it and over it and over it until it's quote unquote perfect. And it's just like, really, you just pick an arbitrary time where you're done writing, and then. But like I think you had this, like, there was this thing in you from early on, and that like blossomed when you like found music and that you could be this person.
Yeah, I guess so. I've never really, it sounds strange to say, I guess, but I've never really thought about it like that hard. But I think it did start with the poetry. I think that was like the seed of it. And then it kind of came from there. And then as I started writing songs more, like now I never write poetry. I can't remember the last time I wrote a poem. And it's weird. Like I was really inspired by Patti Smith and the way she put poetry to music, but I've never been able to do that. I've tried, when I first started writing songs, I tried very much to do that. But then for me, they're like two different things. When I write lyrics now, it's actually, I have the melody in my head before the words. So to me, like writing poetry and writing lyrics are pretty different. And I haven't been happy with the times I've tried to kind of like force a poem into music. It just doesn't work for me. It's kind of like a little bit two different things. So I kind of lost that poetry thing when I started doing music, but maybe that was the original inspiration for the music stuff. I don't know.
Yeah. Last question, and this is purely out of self-interest, but when your mom's family left Germany in 1933, Do you know much about that story? Just like, what were the inklings? What were the things where they're like, oh, we should get out of here and we can? And like, how did they actually like, my wife and I have thought about like, what's going to happen in the United States and what are our red lines for going? And we're kind of not sure. And so I'm just kind of curious, like, what was that about for them?
Well, I do know that story actually. So my mother was about 7, and so she was in school already, and she told me that like the teacher in school would call up her parents and say, "Oh, I think Ellen's not feeling very well today," and that was kind of code for like they were going to have some Nazi thing in the school, and she remembers like seeing like they're being singing songs like I love the the look, of Jewish blood on my sword, and like so there was already a lot of anti-Semitic stuff happening, and my grandmother was the one that was insistent that they leave, and I think my grandfather and the rest of the extended family, like many people there, couldn't really believe what was happening, and they're like, "No, we're German, and this is going to go away and stuff." And for whatever reason, she was like, I think they were already like sending like Gestapo. Like my mom told me something about like in the waiting room, like where my grandfather was, office was. They were sending like officers. So there was already like laws against Jews. There was like stuff happening. I can't remember exactly when Hitler got into power, but it was before that. He was already in power at that point. And it was my grandmother, and she just insisted to my grandfather that they get out. And so they did, and everyone kind of thought they were crazy, but they were really only not many of people in that family survived, the ones that didn't get out, and my mother still tells me the story of they emigrated to Palestine in like 1934 or something like that, and she remembers her grandmother from Gliwice, which is one of the Polish towns now, coming to visit them in Palestine, and that her parents begging her not to go back to Poland, and she went back and ended up dying in Auschwitz. So there was a lot of kind of. So I know the story, and I know they went to Berlin and they said goodbye to some family there, and then they took a train to, I think, Trieste, and they took a boat from Trieste to Palestine. But so I know that kind of story of it, but I think is for some reason it was like my grandmother was just absolutely like, no, we got to get out. But it was early, and it was lucky.
Yeah.
So just have her to thank for that.
They just left everything, or they were able to sell stuff. The actual like day-to-day stuff you have to do to flee a country is puzzling.
I mean, I guess they took what they could. They went on a boat. I mean, they couldn't take everything. They probably left a lot of stuff, I'm guessing. I don't know.
And then your parents meet in Palestine?
Yes.
Mark? Yeah.
They were, they grew up together. They were like, they're the same age. They went to the same schools, and yeah.
Oh, wow. And then what brought them to DC?
They actually went to Boston first. Originally, my father got a Navy scholarship to do some kind of like postgraduate stuff at Harvard by this guy, Walsh, who was in the Navy, but also a mathematics professor, and who taught a year at the university in Jerusalem. And I guess my father was one of his students, and he really liked my father, and he put in a word for him and say, we got to bring this guy on a scholarship to do whatever. So my father ended up going to Harvard and getting his PhD there. And my mother followed him, and she also ended up eventually getting a PhD. She became a psychologist, but she had kind of a different path than him. My father was like a math whiz from the time he was like a young kid. He was like one of those people that taught themselves calculus when they were 10, that kind of thing. So
Sure.
I mean, he never became like a famous mathematician. He taught at, University of Maryland and, whatever. Like he didn't, it wasn't like some thing, but he was, he was, I guess, really talented at what he did and was recognized. So he got over here on a scholarship. My mother kind of followed him and managed to get her own sort of scholarship. And then, yeah, that's it. And they stayed. And they stayed, and I think neither of them, already like, they both had a lot of war experiences in Palestine already by the mid 50s of like, and they both were in the army. They both had been involved in wars there. And so I think that they really did not want to go back there, even though it was a place that I think in a lot of ways felt like home to them for many years, more than Lithuania or Germany. But I think that they never wanted to go back and raise a family there. They were happy to kind of be somewhere that wasn't at war constantly. So
yeah. Well,
yeah.
Well, Thalia, thank you so much for taking the time. You're on tour. Thank you for talking to me. This has been an absolute delight. Thank you.
It's been really fun talking to you. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. And it's nice to meet you. And
of course, I've been a fan of your music for decades now, so I really appreciate you talking.
Awesome. No problem.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye.